I'm John Quelch, Dean of the University of Miami Herbert Business School, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to the first of a new lecture series sponsored by the Knight Foundation. Before we turn over to our distinguished speaker, Anne Wojcicki, I'd like to first introduce Raul Moas, who is an MBA alum from our school, but more importantly, the executive director of the Knight Foundation. And Raul will say a few words about the new partnership we have with Knight. Raul?
Thank you so much, John, President Frank, and it's wonderful to be with you all and everyone who's joining us today online. Knight Foundation is a Miami-based foundation, but we're national in our scope. We work deeply in the areas of journalism, the arts, and informed and engaged communities. Our work in Miami really is centered around advancing the city's innovation and tech economy. And one of the ways that we're doing that is by promoting the ideas that are flowing through the city. Miami is known absolutely for moving in people and goods, in tourism, in importing and exporting. And we're just getting started on this question of moving in ideas, of globally relevant ideas that are shaping the way we live, we work, we play. And so it's amazing to be here with Anne and to partner with the University of Miami on a series that'll bring some of the world's kind of preeminent venture builders to Miami virtually for now, and really help give us insights in terms of what's changing the world, what is it that is most pressing in terms of opportunity, not just need, and where it is that Miami might find its place in that innovation economy.
So thanks very much, Raul. We appreciate the support. And for those in the audience who don't know it, Knight Foundation has been very generous to the university for many decades. We have, for example, at Miami Herbert Business School, a distinguished professor of economics who is funded by Knight Foundation. So we really appreciate the continuation of the partnership to enable us to bring some of the best and brightest and most innovative folks from Silicon Valley in particular to our friends and alumni in Miami. Let me hand over now to President Julio Frank, who will introduce our distinguished guest.
Thank you, Dean Quelch, and good evening to everyone. And let me add my very special thanks to the Knight Foundation. We're delighted to have Raul Moas here. They are not only supporting this series, but they have been one of the main supporters of the University of Miami over the years. So delighted to have this new partnership with the Knight Foundation. And I'm also delighted to have the opportunity to introduce Anne Wojcicki, who's the founder and CEO of 23andMe. In fact, it's interesting, but I met Anne in person, not virtually, very soon after I had arrived at the University of Miami as president. I, of course, knew about her. She's a legendary figure in the innovation space. And I was already very impressed by her many accomplishments in the world of tech, where she's truly been a visionary, making really the complexity of genetics accessible to the average person. Anne is a perfect example of someone who has turned her passion into a successful venture, and in so doing has really broken new ground. As one of the very top executives in Silicon Valley, her success has also broken barriers for women in technology. I am not going to belabor her bio, which all of you can and probably have already read, but instead I would like just to finish by sharing the impact that 23andMe has had on me personally, because after I met Anne, about 5 years ago when I had just arrived in Miami, she was kind enough at that meeting to give me a 23andMe kit. And of course, as the child of refugees and migrants, issues of ancestry have always been of great interest, and I've been very curious, like most of us are, about my family's roots. But beyond satisfying my curiosity, I have found that 23andMe has provided really, literally vital health information. It's given me some glimpse into genetically determined propensities and vulnerabilities that then empower the person who's doing this to make more informed choices about lifestyles. So that's when I say that it's the amazing way of connecting incredibly complex science, making it simple enough for people to actually guide some decisions. And that is the power of connecting science to our everyday lives. We're seeing that unfold before our eyes now with the pandemic, where we're thirsting for expertise in order to shape our own behaviors. We're clearly living in a time when we can see the absolute need to make data-driven decisions. And we are very fortunate to have this evening someone whose ideas her vision has put data into the hands of people to shape everyday decisions. So please join me in giving Anne a very warm University of Miami welcome.
All right, thank you very much, President Frank. So let's dive in, Anne, if we may, and start at the beginning. When and why did you found 23andMe?
Well, I'd always loved healthcare, and I always wanted to be a doctor. I thought I'd go back and I'd do an MD, PhD, and very randomly, I think one of the beauties of being in your early 20s and when you graduate school is that you have all kinds of entry-level opportunities come your way. And I got an entry-level opportunity to be part of an investment firm on Wall Street. And I was working with the Wallenberg family in Sweden. Turned out to be an amazing opportunity. I was working with the Wallenberg family in Sweden, looking at things like xenotransplantation, whether or not pig organs were going to be used in humans, or I started looking at some genetic companies like Affymetrix, and I loved it. And it was just an incredible opportunity to learn about the healthcare industry and learn about all these companies. And in some ways, there's no better opportunity when you're on Wall Street and you have a big checkbook. You can call up anyone. So I could call up the CEO of Glaxo and get a meeting. And so I spent 10 years on Wall Street investing. And I went from this euphoric state of feeling like I have, the world is so great, there's so much that's going to change, to really starting to understand that the healthcare system is really optimized for monetizing illness. And that there's almost no parts of healthcare that genuinely care about me, the individual. And I remember being on a call once with a hospital, an insurance company, a pharmacy benefit manager, I think there was a physician, and everyone was arguing about this patient. And I said, isn't it strange that the one person who really matters in this debate isn't here? Like the patient. And I found over time that healthcare is entirely a business to business, it's a B2B opportunity. And they rarely come down and ask you what you actually want. And in some ways, the healthcare system is so awful because the consumer doesn't really have a voice because you don't pay the bill. So the only thing that it reminded me of, I lived in Poland, communist Poland in 1992 as the wall was coming down. And I felt like healthcare is a lot like communism. You have a big brother who makes all these decisions for you, and you're sort of seen as being too incompetent to make your own decisions. And I had grown up as a Kaiser Permanente baby. So Kaiser Permanente is big out here, and which is, again, has the insurance as well as the physician side. And my physicians had always really taught me to take care of myself and about prevention. And so I started to realize more and more that there was this real disconnect of what the system, most of the healthcare system encouraged, but the way I had been raised was about, actually having a more prevention mindset and learning how to take care of myself. And I felt like my physicians, my pediatrician believed in me, believed that I had the opportunity to actually think about myself and to own some of my decisions. And I felt like the rest of the healthcare industry today really does not. And I think if you just think about the fact that you can't get a blood test on your own. You can't necessarily make prescription decisions. You have to get a physician for, to sign off on most types of procedures you want. So the system assumes that you are not capable of taking care of yourself. So 23andMe started with the idea that I fundamentally don't agree with that. I think that individuals actually can step up when given the opportunity. And you have a great example with that with type 2 diabetes. And actually there was a great museum exhibit at one point about when insulin came out and how controversial it was about whether or not people could actually take care of themselves on their own. And I also saw from the HIV community in the late 90s, how much the HIV community stepped up, and they were activists. They weren't just wearing a ribbon and walking and raising money. They were angry, like angry mobs of people who were demanding accountability and change. And they wanted to be involved and they wanted to be trusted as a partner. So when 23andMe started, I had the good fortune of seeing Google start in my sister's garage. And I saw, social media happening, Web 2.0, was friends with Katerina Fake, who ran Flickr, who was like explaining what was like the social media world that was going to come online. And I said, why don't we try to combine the revolution in genetics, make it accessible to people, and combine that with this social networking platform. And suddenly we'll empower people to have genetic information on their own. And secondly, we'll create the world's largest community of people with their genetic information. And so they can learn from each other and we'll be able to make discoveries unlike anyone else in the world. So that started really in 2006 after sort of those years of being on Wall Street and seeing how much the system was really not set up for us, and really believing that I, as an individual, I think I have actually quite a good potential of taking care of myself and owning more of that relationship as a partnership with a physician rather than just as someone who's subservient.
Thanks. So this is a little bit about empowerment. It's about democratization. How has the mission and or the vision evolved over time, if at all? And supplementary question, were you surprised about how much resistance there's been to embracing this, or have you been pleased with the progress you've made?
I think what's interesting about 23andMe is if I look at my Series A documents, it's almost exactly the same pitch as, what we're doing today is almost the same as what we pitched in the Series A. That said, the path to getting there has definitely evolved. So for example, we did not follow a FDA path. And we obviously, after our 2013 warning letter, we obviously have been following that. I had no illusions that this was going to be easy. And I think one of the most important things I learned from being on Wall Street, and part of the reason why we set up 23andMe the way it is because I realized that there's so much money in healthcare that you're never going to change the system from within. That if you want to actually make significant changes in healthcare, you have to be outside the system. So 23andMe made very intentional decisions. Like we're not HIPAA compliant. And we're like very proudly, like we don't need to be. I don't have reimbursement. Like I don't want to take federal funding. So we made very intentional decisions, but we also knew that that would piss people off, in part because within the healthcare ecosystem, there's so much money and everyone works together in that way. And one of our first meetings we had, which was with one of President Bush's health advisors, we had a dinner. And again, we hadn't even launched the company yet. And he actually got up and he left the dinner. And he said, I am so offended by what you're doing. And it was interesting what he said. He's like, I'm so offended by what you're doing. This information should not go directly to patients. And also that we were going to be the cause for millions of women around the country being abandoned because people would figure out that their children were not from their fathers, and that families all over would break up. So we had no illusion right away, like that there was going to be some controversy.
what about the business model then? You've alluded to it, but in terms of the balance between B2C and B2B, and the revenue streams that you look for, what's the balance? What's the mix? And has that evolved over time?
I would say that's actually the part that has evolved more. The business model has always been the same. Like, let's enable consumers to get access to their genetic information at an affordable price. And one thing that I learned when I was investing in places like India is that there's largely a self-pay model. And that works. And that so much of the cost in healthcare comes from the fact that there's so many people involved in the food chain. And that collecting money even just takes, it's so expensive to have a reimbursed product. So the business model has been very firm in that we're a direct-to-consumer company. And when we had our FDA warning letter, it was an opportunity for us to change that. And we decided very clearly that we're not. Like, we are a direct-to-consumer company, and we're out to prove that consumers actually can be more directly in control and have more direct access to their healthcare information. So that said, we have absolutely evolved models in terms of what do we want to do with all the genetic community essentially that we have. So all of our customers, the 80% of our customers who have consented into research, how do we want to monetize all of that information, but also do what's really right for our customers, because our customers have trusted us to say, I'm opting into research. We want to advance the understanding of human genetics and basic science. So originally we were partnering with pharma companies and researchers to help them do their own drug discovery. And at some point we realized that the best way for us to make advancements in the understanding of human genetics and to benefit our customers is for us to actually do drug discovery ourselves. So we hired Richard Scheller, who was the head of R&D, research and development at Genentech. We brought him on board, and we now have a 100-person R&D team, and we have a large partnership with GSK, and we are in the thick of it really with drug discovery. So I would say that was probably one of those moments. I always knew we wanted to influence drug discovery, but it was a debate about whether or not we influence it ourselves, like whether we own the drug discovery or we help others do it.
So what would a typical partnership look like with a drug company? Access to data in return for what?
Okay. Sorry, my baby just woke up. Just was checking on the camera. So what we never give out individual level genetic information, and a partnership, unless it's explicitly consented. So a partnership usually is about the summary statistics. So someone might come to us and say, let's look at the summary statistics for depression. And so we're not giving out the individual level information, but we're working on what the summary statistics say about that condition. We have some examples though that are exceptions. So for instance, like the Michael J. Fox partnership, where people are consenting for individual level data, specifically because Michael J. Fox is helping manage this, where they know a number of qualified researchers, and they want those qualified researchers to be able to get access to their information. So one thing that was always important to me, again, one thing that I learned from those Wall Street days, is that someone is sick. So let's say someone has, sarcoma, and they consent for one study with Pfizer, and then their data is only there. And I found that there were people who really wanted to have an impact, especially people who have a fatal illness, want to have an impact about how are they going to impact the next generation. And participating in only one study is frankly like one of the worst things for them. So finding a way that they can participate in multiple studies and have them own their data rather than Pfizer or Stanford or anyone institution own their information. Allow people to participate in as many programs as they want. So part of what we try to do is educate our customers as well to say, listen, like, you own your information. 23andMe is going to do research programs, but if there's other things that people want to do, they should absolutely download their data and work with other academic groups or other pharma groups.
Can you just go back to the 2013 FDA letter for a moment, which you kindly brought up yourself? On a personal leadership level, when that letter arrived in front of you, what did you think, and what did you think you had to do in the first hour, in the first 24 hours, in the first week? How did you handle that? Because that was almost like a cease and desist order.
Sorry, my baby is screaming. The first reaction, ironically, I got a text. I was at an offsite and I got a message from my assistant at the time who said, you got a couriered letter from the FDA. And I said, my first thing was, well, don't sign for it. So, so there was a little bit I could say of denial. And then I got the letter and we read it. And, I was like, yeah, it's not great, but it's manageable. And I think it took me really the following 2 weeks that we had to respond for it to sink in that we have to change. And actually, I'm really grateful to this day for Kessler, who was the previous commissioner, who's at UCSF, and was an advisor to 23andMe in the early days. And he actually called me and he said, Anne, I know you well enough to know that you might not be taking that letter seriously. And I'm telling you now, you have to change. And it was helpful. And there was a number, there was another regulatory team that I sat down with where they asked me, they said, Anne, you have 2 choices here. You can pivot. Like, if you want to sell this company in the next couple of years, you pivot, you clean it up, and you get out, you sell it. But if you really want to make a difference, stick to your guns and go through the FDA process and prove out to them that that what you're doing is accurate and that consumers can handle this information. And I think that ultimately, like, that was the mission. Like, when I think back on the HIV patients and what they did, like, we're a mission-driven company. It was about, like, I'm standing up for the rights of the individual. Like, individuals in my mind absolutely have the right to get access to their genetic information, and we can prove out that they can handle this information. And I get so agitated even to this day when people tell me, oh, a consumer can't handle this information, or it's going to generate like doctor's visits or anxiety, or people are going to, hurt themselves. Like, we actually now have the data to prove, like, people are far more capable than you ever imagined. And so I'm really proud, because I think that it was a really hard moment. And one of the things I learned, like, you don't pivot overnight. It really took us years. And the FDA team that we brought in, Kathy Hibbs, our head of regulatory, who joined, and everyone else on her team, it's rough changing a culture. And because it's every part, you have to change your engineering, you have to change your product, you have to change the research, you have to change every aspect. So figuring out how you're going to change it all. And like I said, it takes time. And now it's, I mean, it's not easy, but now, like, we changed. So now it's, but it's a total testament to, people really believed in that mission. And again, when I think back on what motivated everybody, the shining light, our lighthouse was, we believe in the potential of the consumer.
You survived really on ancestry as opposed to health risk data. To go back to what President Frank said at the outset. This is a significant part of the attraction and appeal for some consumers, right? How can you talk about the segmentation of the consumer base a little bit, the different segments who are interested in 23andMe?
Yeah, we have two products, the health and ancestry, and then ancestry alone. And without a doubt, what's taken society by storm was the ancestry composition report. People love seeing where they're from and who they're connected to. They absolutely love that. And we get a lot of customers who believe that they are, 100% French or 100% Jewish, or anything. We get all kinds of people. Everyone walks in, and you can phenotype me, and what I look like may or may not be reflective of what's in my DNA. And we have a number of publications that have come out about that talk about sort of what that the composition of how people self-report versus actually what's in their DNA. So the community that we have is roughly 50% men, 50% women, slightly more women. It's slightly bimodal in that, we have, people tend to buy more around reproductive age. And then when they get older, a lot of, people are interested in the ancestry. It's probably the most frequently visited types of reports. And people are learning, people are still learning more and more what the health side, what it is. And, part of it is I look at almost as post-communism, those baby steps of teaching people, you can go and get all this information and learn about your genetic risks, and you're going to be able to step up and actually take actions that are potentially going to prevent disease.
Right. Let's turn to current events for a moment. I'm sure you are involved in COVID-related matters. What does 23andMe do in response to a crisis like this? Have you been able to be helpful in research, for example?
One of the things that is core to 23andMe, so for over a decade now, we've been doing research with our customers. So we give our customers, when they sign up, an opportunity to opt in or opt out of research. And 80% of our customers today opt into research. And once they're opted in, we put out a number of different types of questions. And it could be from, serious health-related issues to fun questions about cilantro and whether or not you think it tastes like soap or you love it. And with that, we're actually able to make all kinds of discoveries with this really broad swath of questions that we're asking our customers. And what's also beautiful about it is that you can do it really quickly and inexpensively, because my customers are coming in every day and they're already engaged, they're online, and I can email them. So if I email you, John, something that is very specific and targeted towards you and information you've told me, for instance, you tell me you're asthmatic and I say, here's a targeted survey towards you, we have a high engagement rate because we find people really do care about their health and they're interested in contributing in science. So on April 6th, we launched a COVID-19 survey to our 12 million customers. And we have now close to 1 million people who have taken the study. We have over 10,000 that have that say that they've had it. We have thousands who said that they were hospitalized. We did find that there is a association with the O blood type, that people who have O are slightly protected. And we have a number of other interesting early findings that we're looking to publish on.
And would you say, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's an example of how, again, when I think of the way most institutions do research and most pharma companies do research, they start a study, they have a lot of, principal investigators, and then the studies, and it's a specific phenotype, and then the study's over and they dismantle everything. And that, to me, again, from those Wall Street days, always seemed crazy. If you're gonna set up and build something, set it up and then keep it running and keep it open so that you can keep asking people questions. And so it's really paid off in an example like COVID-19, where people, like it's essential that we get this information right away. And it would have been really expensive to have to find these people, sequence them. Like we already have everybody genotyped.
Yes.
So like real-time research, and almost like in this instantaneous world of big data, you want to be able to get answers quickly.
And would you say that a crisis like this has boosted overall interest in 23andMe's core product as well? In other words, do you find many more people than you expected this year are really interested in accessing the basic product or the ancestry product?
People are definitely more interested in 23andMe, but the thing that actually makes me most excited is that I think people understand the research. Like the research discoveries that we're making are very applicable to all of our customers. And so I think the product that we have today is almost the first step in a long journey that's going to come, because we understand so little of the genome. So I can, we have 100+ reports today, but in 10, 20 years, we're going to understand that much more. And so this is the first example where we say, like, things that are relevant to all of us, we can make these discoveries quickly, and then we can give that information back to you in a real-time fashion.
Mm-hmm. How has 23andMe as a business responded to the COVID crisis in terms of remote working, for example, in terms of changes in business practices or HR management? How have you coped with the current situation, or were you already very much equipped to go online and be remote from the get-go?
We were not, I feel lucky because we actually, before there was a shelter-in-place order, we actually started planning for it just the week before. So I feel like we had a 1-week head start on at least testing out the infrastructure and making things work. I think it's really interesting, and especially for this community, that from a business school perspective, like the world has changed. Like I can run a company from my pool house, and I can, I have hundreds of employees who are working effectively from home. And for some people, they love it. I think one thing that's really interesting is we talk about diversity. There's some people where they are optimized in this kind of environment. Like coming in the office is not optimal for them. So it absolutely doesn't work for everyone. And there's definitely moments where I would love to have people in person. And we also do run a lab, and we've had to make some significant changes to the lab in terms of being able to keep social distancing and, protocols of how many people are in the building and experiment timelines. But I think that there's a lot of people who suddenly recognize, like, we were traveling too much, we forced FaceTime too often, and being remote can work in a lot of ways. So I think that the world is likely forever changed. And does that mean that I can have a remote, distant workforce? Like, I don't know, potentially. But it's become very clear to me that there's certain roles where they definitely do not need to be in the office on a daily basis. And Zoom is really effective. So we've closed the office for the rest of this year. And I'm looking to 2021 about what we'll do. And I have that luxury. My lab has to keep running, but I have the luxury for a lot of my jobs can be remote. But I really think it's an interesting business opportunity because, again, the world's shifted. Yeah.
And if I sent in a a little saliva today, would I get my test results back as promptly as before, or are LabCorp's facilities all tied up with COVID-related matters and so forth?
The turnaround times are still good. We have a dedicated team there and dedicated facilities, so its turnaround times have been the same.
Okay. One of the things that you mentioned in the prior response was diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was very impressed a couple of months ago with a very forthright and frank self-appraisal of 23andMe that you put out to the community in response to the resurgence of interest in Black Lives Matter and so forth. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and how a company such as yours can address these very important issues of racial injustice, etc.?
I think it's really important for companies to recognize that all of us are doing something wrong. And I think of 23andMe, like we're a mission-driven company. I have a lot of people who really care about these topics. And, you know, it was even a couple of years ago that the conversation of race, because of ancestry composition being so popular, the conversation of race was front and center. And I said, there's only one response for us to do. Like, we have to jump in. And we actually have a podcast called Spit. We work with Baratunde, who runs that podcast. And we started lecture series within the building. We have really, we had really jumped into the conversation on race a couple of years prior. And that said, like when Black Lives Matters, I think the best thing that happened is the conversations that I've had with employees, and especially our Black employees, like understanding some of those issues and the microaggressions and things that have happened that I just wasn't necessarily aware of. I have to understand those, and then I have to make real changes. And it became clear to me, like I talk the talk, but if I look, I don't have any Black employees over a director level. And I have to think about what is it in the environment that's creating issues, because clearly there is something. And as we had those conversations, we started to realize. So we've kind of taken these 4-pillar approaches of like understanding, like we need to recruit better. And recruiting better really means, you know, there's data out there about how 70% of hires, 70% of people who have been hired, they come from a LinkedIn connection. So if I'm not connected on LinkedIn with people, like I need to make sure that I have diversity in my LinkedIn. So first is you know, making sure how we're hiring. Second is really understanding the culture. Like what are the microaggressions or small things that we're doing that we're not necessarily even aware of? Like I need to make sure that we're changing and educating people and creating an environment for people to be honest. And then third, we're looking at all of our partnerships. So who am I? Like I work with LabCorp, I work with DNA Genotech, like I have recruiters. Like what's the Black representation in all of my partnerships? So I have to look there, like am I just propagating the problem there? And then also in my research in the product. So we look at, for instance, 23andMe does a lot of academic partnerships. Can we make sure that I'm also partnering with a diverse set of academics? Mm-hmm. And can I make sure that my product is reflective of our community? And 20% of the 23andMe community is non-European. So there's more absolutely that we can do for the African-American community, for the Hispanic community. So there's a lot that we can do. And it's almost like the FDA. It's not going to be overnight, but it's going to take us time. And the first step is having those dialogues and recognizing that it's a problem.
Talk a little bit about women in venture capital and entrepreneurship and in Silicon Valley. Progress?
I think when I worked on Wall Street, like I had one office where it was 40 men and me. and there was one bathroom. Like I always remember those days. Like it was rough. So finding, and I realized like there was a lot that I just got used to that just was not appropriate. And there's every so often things happen where I say like, you know what, this old boys network can just be exhausting. But I think it's changing. I think so. I think venture capital is still evolving. And one thing I try to do, and I try to also do with my sister, is similar on the diversity angle, is make sure that I am partnering with, female venture capitalists, as well as Black venture capitalists and Latino venture capitalists. Like I need diversity. And I really believe, I sit on the board of Kaiser Permanente's medical school, and they have such a fabulously diverse board. And I learn so much from the community. Like I tend to just listen because diversity it makes a better product and you learn so much. So I think my investments will be better if I have a diverse investment group. And I think I have a responsibility of making sure that I am partnering and I'm mentoring. So there's moments definitely, I think, where it can be exhausting, but I think it's getting better. And I think anyone who's in a position to help change, you have that responsibility of being cognizant and really thinking about it and reaching out. So I try to spend a fair amount of time trying to make sure I'm mentoring and that I actually do reach out. And I also invest with other female and diverse funds.
Okay. So we have quite a few questions that have come in on the Q&A and the chat functions. I'm going to get to those in a second, but one last question, if I may, Anne, just on your leadership approach and what you've learned over the years. What would be 2 or 3 core principles that would guide your leadership style, if you like?
I think the first thing that people would say 2 things about me. One, I'm very direct. And I never want there to be any ambiguity or question about where I stand. So I think people realize, like in meetings and others, like I can sometimes be too direct, but I'm very direct. And I've kind of learned over time that it just helps everyone to eliminate some of the fluff. I think second is I'm very family friendly. And I'm a huge believer that people do their best work when they don't worry about their families and that they feel supported with their kids. And similar almost with COVID-19 and the work from home, I don't believe in regular hours. Like I think people should absolutely, like, again, you're an adult, you know what's best. And if you want to work from 6 to 2, great. And so you have to have some structure because you need to be able to have meetings and you need to be able to overlap. But I'm really supportive of people making sure that they take care of themselves as well. And I never want to be that employer that just tries to, squeeze people for everything that they can do. I want people to feel like 23andMe was a nurturing place. And I think when you do that, I think people give you the best.
So question, first one, there are a couple of questions regarding data security. Have you been hacked? What's the response there?
We said from our earliest days that we have no business if we can't protect customers' privacy. So it's always been a high priority for the company. And when I think about the team that joined, a number of them came from the banking industry, or the PayPal world. Like it was about how do we make sure that we are doing everything possible. And there's a lot you can learn from banking, because as much as I would love to learn about your genetics, I'd probably rather learn about your bank account. So it's an incredibly high priority for us. We recently just hired a chief security officer to oversee. It's something that we stay incredibly vigilant on. That said, I think one of the most important things for companies also to be honest with is you can never guarantee that you're not going to get hacked. So for customers, when in the early days when I worked with privacy experts and they would come up with one, you know, all kinds of different scenarios, and finally we said, listen, for people who are super worried, they just shouldn't be online. But otherwise, everything that we do is about making sure that we can do, you know, take the reasonable risks and do everything we can to protect privacy. And so we have not been hacked, and we stay vigilant on top of making sure that your data is controlled exclusively by you.
Okay. Next question. Might the price of the kit come down further to allow more people to access the service? Or are you happy with the number of people you already have in the database and don't really need to draw in that many more consumers?
People would joke. I always say I'll be happy-ish when I have 1 billion people in 23andMe. So we're only 12 million now, so we have a ways to go. That said, you know, there's somewhat of a floor of how low the price can go, because you have real costs in terms of the kit, the mailing, the genotyping, the computational analysis, et cetera. So I would not anticipate lowering the price from here. I think we're close to the floor. That said, we do promotions around certain times. We do Mother's Day, Father's Day, holiday promotions. And again, one of the core tenets of what we've tried to always do is make 23andMe as affordable as possible to as wide a number of people. So we try, and again, if some radical technology changes, we'll look to see whether we can lower the price.
How does 23andMe differ from its competitors such as Ancestry?
Well, Ancestry, there's very big differences. Ancestry is really about how do you get your genetic information and then get people interested in their subscription service for their records. And 23andMe is kind of the opposite. We say, we want to engage you in your genetics in total. Like, we see ourselves like we're a genetics company. We're not an ancestry records company. So we want to engage you. Like, the company is all about you. And what makes you up is your ancestry, you know, your family, your health, like all the stories around you. And that's why we've always said, we're not just an ancestry company. We're not just a health company. We're a genetics company. And we engage you in that totality of you. And, you know, part of what's fun when we do our drug discovery and such is that it all comes from your genetics. And what's so exciting is knowing that our collective genetic information is potentially going to cure a disease. Like, that's amazing. So,
in connection with the genetic data, someone asks about a partnership you have with Airbnb.
Oh yeah, you know, it's a really fun program. In part because what happened is that people were learning about their genetic information, and then they were traveling. So you might find out that you are, you know, Polish and British and Italian, and then people were setting up tours to go and visit all these places. And it was amazing. And in some ways, there was no better opportunity than saying, let's get people to stay with locals and really explore the culture. So it was really fun, but it's one of those things. We heard from our customers that they wanted to go travel based off their genetic information.
What's the next feature? What's the next product feature, and what's the 5 to 10 year view of where you wish to be?
I think, so in genetics, there's a lot. We're just finally getting to this point where we have critical mass of data. And there's a really interesting kind of report called polygenic risk scores. And polygenic risk scores mean that I'm looking at common diseases like heart disease or type 2 diabetes, and I'm not looking at one genetic mutation, but I'm looking at hundreds of genetic mutations that I add up into a score that then tells you where you fall on the risk spectrum. So there's some customers, for instance, like we have our type 2 diabetes report, and we have some customers who are really much higher risk based on their polygenic risk score. And those individuals now have an opportunity to potentially change behavior and try and really prevent developing type 2 diabetes. So I think that's what's really exciting about some of these polygenic risk scores, is the opportunity for people to know that there's a risk, and then say, is there now an opportunity for them to change behavior and prevent it? And frankly, I'd say that's one of the next big questions in the medical world. And, you know, a lot of physicians, if you ask them, will usually say, we don't believe people will change their behavior. The same way we didn't believe that people had the ability to handle complex genetic information, most people will say, we don't believe people will actually change their behavior. So what 23andMe is out to do is to say, I can actually get people to change their behavior. And if I can get more people, like success for me in the ultimate, you know, the lifespan of this company is, can I get more people to be healthy at 100?
Yes.
Like, you know, effectively managed and like on dialysis at 100, but healthy at 100.
Okay. What role does machine learning and AI algorithms, et cetera, play in developing your research platform and research capability?
It's a great question. And machine learning and AI are definitely the hot buzzwords right now. And there's very real applications, but there's also areas where it would be overkill. So we use machine learning absolutely on, actually more probably on the ancestry side right now. So we definitely try to, you know, understand better, how can we actually have better and better resolution as we're telling people where their DNA is from. And we're using it as well on the health side, you know, to help better understand, can we predict, you know, predicting disease. And also, again, we'll start applying it to the drug discovery side as appropriate.
What's the percentage of error in the output on the health risk data in particular? How do you strive for better accuracy? And as you improve the accuracy, does that somehow or other obsolete the data that were collected from folks earlier under a less accurate technology?
It's a great question, and unfortunately a relatively complicated response. So there's genetic associations, like there's one for cystic fibrosis called Delta 508. And if I know that that genetic association is associated with cystic fibrosis, it's well established. And I have proven out that my platform can detect that accurately. And we have, you know, the concordance studies that we've done with the FDA, most of this is public and out there, but we can very accurately detect those mutations. So you get another set of questions for things like the polygenic risk scores that I was just talking about, where it's an evolving science of how well can you actually start to identify these individuals who are on the risk spectrum. So as you will probably be able to refine it over time. It probably won't vary massively, but because people are on, you know, your genetic platform is not going to change. So as things get improved, we'll be able to just automatically update your results. So we've told our customers every few years, you should again, I think it's every 3 or so years, you should respit, because we'll move over to other platforms. But otherwise it's about reinterpreting the existing platform that you have. But I would say, again, what we've done with the FDA has really shown how accurate this platform is. And 23andMe, because we are direct to consumer, we feel very responsible. When we're telling you something, we need to make sure that we feel really strongly about, like, this is an accurate statement. So we do not get into the gray zone about some of these mutations that have sort of an unknown association. That's called these variants of unknown significance. We really just tell people what we know for sure.
Thank you. What does 23andMe do or plan to do to improve public health outcomes through community-based studies? And do you partner with public health initiatives such as NIH's All of Us program?
We haven't, you know, ironically, we've tried for years to work with the All of Us program because it's very similar. Like essentially what the All of Us program is trying to do is almost create a government version of 23andMe. So we're super committed to, you know, making sure that, you know, we require all of our research to be in, when we publish, needs to be accessible. We try to make, we give away a number of research programs. So for instance, if there was a public county health official that wanted to do a study with us, they could be one of the programs that we select to do those kind of research programs. So we definitely think a lot about public health and how our information could be used in those right ways. And frankly, one of the things I'm most excited about is prevention. Because prevention, again, going back to the earliest stuff I had about Wall Street, prevention is not something that is monetized by the existing healthcare system. Like if your doctor tells you to exercise, stop smoking, and lose weight, none of those are the responsibility of your physician. But all of those are the things that are going to have the biggest impact on your life. So what we think a lot about is that how do you get the genetic information to trigger behavior change? And I think that's where there'll be a lot of interesting things that we can look at in terms of, again, life expansion, like childhood, you know, helping children live on a healthier course. So there's a lot I think that we could do as we think about prevention. And so we're always open. If someone has an idea, we're always open.
Okay. So we have a pretty international audience. So someone's asking about the relative difference between the amount of data or results that you can get if you subscribe to 23andMe in Europe versus in the USA. In other words, I think differences in the data that the results provide. Is that the case, or is there a difference in what is provided if I send in my saliva kit in Europe versus in the US?
Yeah, there are unfortunately a few differences. We have, so similar to regulatory rules. So we have, we're not in.
Not sure if Anne can hear me at this point. Anne, can you hear me? I think we
lost her.
may have lost her. But I think the answer was that there are differences in regulations in Europe and in the US, and that explains the variance in the data that's permitted to be issued. Hi, you're back.
Yes, great.
Can you hear me, Anne?
Sorry about that, I'm back.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
So I think we understood that it's difference in regulations that cause the variance in the data that's provided, right? Okay. Back momentarily. So what, Anne, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Sorry, I think
All right, okay.
So it's mostly the regulatory side. It
right.
creates regulatory issues. and so we have, like, the UK has slightly different types of rules about what we can do. So we have to comply with all the various regulatory laws. But definitely, South America, for instance, which I imagine you have a significant population here, has been high on our priority list. It's a lot of laws for us to, it's another regulatory leap.
Right. So a couple of final ones. Has the science on using results of genome-wide association studies in medicine progressed as fast as you thought when 23andMe was founded?
I think the only disappointment I have is how little genetics is used in clinical trials and broadly in medicine. Like, the acceptance by the medical world is really just starting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super excited about some of that potential. There was a great talk at one of the major genetic meetings, and one of the things they said is, like, I think it's time for us to recognize that direct-to-consumer genetic testing does provide some value. And so I look at, again, it's part of where I said, again, healthcare can only change with an external force. I really do believe, like, we had to go outside, direct to consumer, have millions of people to kind of push the agenda.
Right.
And I think that, again, it was my expectation that it was going to take a long time to have physician adoption and adoption by the pharmaceutical world. So it's coming, and I can see the light now that it's coming, but it has, it's been 14 years.
Right.
Like, even now, like, when I hear about people who are dying because they had an undetected BRCA mutation for breast cancer, it's crazy. Like, it's absolutely crazy. No one should be dying from one of these genetic mutations that is easily detectable. It's crazy. And that is it. Like, I point the finger 100% at the medical system and the reimbursement system. They make it difficult. And that's exactly the problem that 23andMe was trying to solve. Make this information easily accessible, and you will absolutely save some lives.
So we're very fortunate to have Carlos Bustamante on the call with us today from Stanford. He's a presidential scholar at the University of Miami. Carlos, we don't have much time, but do you have a quick question for Anne?
Well, Anne, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. We've been friends for a long time. Miami is currently the epicenter of COVID. And one of the things that many of us are looking to do is follow patients going forward and understand the impact that this infection may have in a subset of patients. I think COVID has taught us not everyone responds the same way. Tell us a little bit about your vision for how continuously following and engaging customers, particularly around this, might make a transformative difference in how we really treat patients going forward.
Well, I think your point is 100% right on something like COVID. Like, we don't know the trajectory of this disease yet. So I have thousands of customers who've told me that they had COVID-19, and another thousands who said they were hospitalized. So I can easily partner with someone like you, Carlos, or others out there, and put out surveys regularly to that community, and partner those findings with other academic programs that are going on to see if we can follow these people and actually understand what's happening. And the reality is, the only way you are going to really understand and eventually be able to conquer COVID-19 is to collect the data so that we can actually make some progress on the vaccines, the treatments, and the prevention.
Amen to that.
We just don't know much. So we absolutely have to keep finding. It's one of those things, like 23andMe in those early days, and you've known us for a long time, but in the early days, people would ask us questions like, we ask a lot of very random questions like cilantro, or we asked about breast size, for instance. But the breast size actually was an example of where we actually published a whole paper about breast size and breast cancer. So sometimes we ask random questions, but then you find these associations that might be incredibly meaningful. So we don't know. Like I have a friend now, somebody who worked for me who's 32 and, was ventilated the other day. Like you have no.
Absolutely. And I think the young people in particular who get hit, some subset, need to be followed, and hopefully we can make that digital net. So I just want to thank you for all the work you've done over the years. You're a hero. You could be working on anything. You're one of the smartest people I know. And it's great to have you in genetics, and thank you for pushing forward on it. You are the conscience of those of us who want to change the system. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Carlos.
Right.
So nice.
So, Anne, thank you so much. As if Carlos's statements were not gift enough, you will know that the University of Miami is known for its swagger.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have one alum who's asked the following question: what is the 23andMe coupon code for today's attendees?
Oh, Kristen, who works with me, we'll see if there's something that we can do.
All right. Okay. Sorry to be so cheeky, but it's part of being the U.
Of course. Of course. Listen, I grew up with a mom who felt the only reason to take me out of school was if there was a great sale. So I understand.
All right. Well, look, thanks so much for being with us. It's been fantastic to have you. And thanks again to the Knight Foundation for giving us such a great speaker to kick off this new series. Good night to you all from Miami. Thank you.